Alright, so in the last video I went through the basics of a vector with you. It has magnitude and direction, and I drew one for you and I showed you that these are the components, and using these two components I showed you how to find the magnitude and the direction, or the length and the angle that that vector is pointing at. So in this video, instead of being given the components and then finding the magnitude and direction, now I'm going to give you a magnitude and direction, and we're going to work backwards to find the components. So let's say that the magnitude of our vector is 10 units long, and let's say that the direction is, I don't know, 200 degrees. So I'm a very visual person. I like to draw my vector. Now I'm not going to be able to draw it with the correct components, but I can at least draw the vector in the correct quadrant here, and just to get a picture in my mind of what it will look like. So I know that my vector is at 200 degrees from standard position. So if I just think about unit 1 where we were drawing angles in standard position, we know the initial side is over here, 90 degrees is up here, 180, 270 is way down here. So we know that 200 degrees is somewhere in this quadrant. And we know that the length of this vector is going to be 10 units because that's the magnitude. Now, this is not drawn to scale because I don't actually know that y component, and I don't actually know this x component. I just drew it in there. So I don't really know either of those things. I need to find the x and find the y. Those are the components that we're looking for. So if you notice, our vector here and our x and our y components, again, they make a right triangle. So we can use right triangle trig in order to help us find the x and the y components. So we know that the length here is 10. We know that this whole angle is 200 degrees, but if I'm just looking at this triangle, this little angle here, well, we know 180 and then is from here to here, and then this whole thing is 200, so this is going to be 20 degrees. So when you have a right triangle and you know one of these acute angles and you know one of your sides, we can use SOHCAHTOA, right triangle trig, to find our x and our y components. So that's all we're going to do. So to find x, we know that this is the adjacent side, and 10 is across from the 90. We know that that's the hypotenuse. So adjacent hypotenuse is cosine. So in order to find the x component, we're going to use the cosine. So the cosine of this 20 degree angle, we know is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, the x over the 10. So now all we have to do is solve for x. So I'll multiply both sides by 10 to move that over. So if I just type in 10 times the cosine of 20 degrees inside of my calculator, so we'll try 10 cosine of 20 degrees. We get 9.397, or let's just round to 9.4. So we know that the x component is about 9.4. Now we also need to look, if you notice, this vector, this x component, this is the negative x direction. So even though the calculator gave me 9.4, for my x component, that horizontal component, we know that because our vector is pointing this way to the left, that it's actually going to be a negative 9.4. So when we go to write our vector in component form, instead of positive 9.4, we need to make sure that we put negative 9.4 because it's pointing in that negative direction. Now we need to find the y component. So again, use this right triangle. The y is the opposite. The 10 is the hypotenuse. So opposite hypotenuse is sine. So to find the y coordinate, we're going to do the sine of 20 degrees, which is the y over 10. So again, multiply by 10. So this time all we have to do is type in 10 times the sine of 20 degrees into our calculator, and that will give us the y component, or that vertical component. So 10 times the sine of 20 degrees is about 3.42. So again, we need to look at this picture here. When our angle is in this third quadrant, our x and our y are both negative. We went left and then we go down. So this y component is also negative. So even though the calculator gives you a positive answer, when you write down your component, you need to know that that is a negative 3.42. So that's how you find the components when you're given the magnitude and the direction. I always sketch a picture so I can visualize my right triangle, and then you just use right triangle trig. Hopefully that helped. If not, shoot me an email and I will help you out. Bye.